Hey there, you're looking kind of cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out all my other socials. Enjoy.
Is this really me? Julia whispered, hardly daring to believe her eyes. She leaned closer to the mirror, studying every detail. The changes were subtle, yet profound. Her jawline had softened ever so slightly, cheekbones more pronounced. Even her eyes seemed different somehow, brighter, more open, or perhaps that was simply the spark of joy and wonder she saw reflected there. Julia ran a hand through her shoulder-length chestnut hair, reveling in its silky texture. She'd been growing it out for months, but today it finally felt like her own. A small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "Hello, Julia," she murmured. The name felt right on her tongue, natural in a way that Jose never had. She straightened up, taking a deep breath. Today marked a new beginning, the first day she truly felt like herself. The hormones had been working their gradual magic for months, but seeing the cumulative effect was overwhelming. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. Happy tears, she realized with a start. When was the last time she'd cried from happiness? Julia dabbed at her eyes carefully, not wanting to smudge the minimal makeup she'd applied. She was still learning, watching countless tutorials and practicing whenever she had a free moment. But she was improving every day. With a final glance in the mirror, Julia squared her shoulders and left the bathroom. Her tiny studio apartment felt different this morning, brighter, more full of possibility. Sunlight dappled the second-hand furniture and stacks of books. It wasn't much, but it was hers, a safe haven where she could be herself. Julia moved to the cramped closet, fingers trailing over the hangers. She'd been slowly building a new wardrobe over the past year. Thrift store finds mingling with a few splurge items she'd treated herself to. Today's outfit had to be perfect. She selected a soft lavender sweater and dark wash jeans. Nothing flashy, but feminine and put together. Professional, she hoped. Today wasn't just the first day she felt like herself. It was also her first day at a new job. A fresh start in every sense. As she dressed, Julia's mind wandered to the journey that had brought her to this moment. It hadn't been easy. There had been painful conversations, lost relationships, moments of crippling doubt. But there had also been unexpected allies, small victories, and a growing sense of peace as she embraced her true self. She thought of her parents, how their initial shock had slowly given way to cautious acceptance. It was still a work in progress, but they were trying. That counted for something. Her sister Elena had been her rock through it all. Julia made a mental note to call her later to share this milestone moment. Elena had been the first person she'd confided in, the first to call her Julia without hesitation. Fully dressed, Julia gave herself a final once-over in the mirror. She looked normal, unremarkable even, and that, she realized, was remarkable in itself. For so long, she'd felt like an outsider in her own skin. Now she simply looked like any other woman heading to work. "You've got this," she told her reflection firmly. Julia gathered her things, purse, phone, lunch packed the night before. Her hand hesitated over a framed photo on the nightstand. It showed a group of smiling people at a park, arms slung around each other, friends from before. She hadn't spoken to most of them in months. With a small sigh, Julia turned the photo face down. Maybe someday she'd be ready to reach out, to explain. But not today. Today was about moving forward. The streets were already bustling as Julia stepped out of her building. The city was waking up, commuters hurrying to trains and buses. Julia joined the flow, just another face in the crowd. She couldn't help glancing at her reflection in shop windows as she passed. Each glimpse sent a little thrill through her. This was real. She was real. The temp agency was located in a nondescript office building downtown. Julia's stomach fluttered with nerves as she rode the elevator to the 5th floor. This wasn't her first job as Julia. She'd been working part-time at a bookstore for a few months. But this was different, a step towards the career she'd always dreamed of. The receptionist greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "Hi, I'm Julia Martinez. I'm starting today as an administrative assistant. Of course. Welcome aboard, Julia. Let me just grab Diane for you. As she waited, Julia's fingers worried at the strap of her purse. What if they could tell? What if... Julia, I'm Diane, the office manager. It's great to meet you. A woman in her 50s extended her hand, smiling. Julia shook it, relaxing slightly at Diane's friendly demeanor. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to get started. We're glad to have you. Let me show you around and introduce you to the team. As they walked through the office, Julia felt her confidence growing. Diane chatted easily about the work they did, the various clients they served. It all sounded fascinating. And this will be your desk, Diane said, gesturing to a tidy workspace. We'll get you set up with login credentials and go over your duties. But first, let's introduce you to everyone. The next few minutes passed in a blur of names and handshakes. Julia did her best to commit each face to memory, smiling and nodding. Everyone seemed welcoming, if a bit preoccupied with their own tasks. All right, let's get you settled in, Diane said once the introductions were complete. I know it can be overwhelming at first, but you'll get the hang of things in no time. As Diane walked her through the various systems and procedures, Julia felt a sense of calm settling over her. This was familiar territory. Organizing, scheduling, managing information. She could do this. Any questions so far? Diane asked. Julia shook her head. I think I've got it. Thank you for being so thorough. Of course, we want you to succeed here, Julia. Don't hesitate to ask if anything comes up. Left alone, at her desk, Julia took a deep breath. She could do this. She belonged here. The morning passed quickly as Julia immersed herself in learning the ropes. By lunchtime, she felt like she was starting to get a handle on things. Hey, new girl! Julia looked up to see one of her coworkers, Megan, smiling at her. A bunch of us usually grab lunch at the deli down the street. Want to join? For a moment, Julia hesitated. Part of her wanted to stay at her desk to avoid any potential awkwardness. But she knew isolating herself wasn't the answer. That sounds great, thanks, she said, standing up. I'm Julia, by the way. I'm terrible with names. I'm sorry. The other woman laughed. No worries, I'm Megan. Come on, I'll introduce you to the lunch crew. As they walked to the elevator, Megan kept up a steady stream of office gossip and tips. Julia found herself relaxing, even laughing at Megan's stories. The deli was crowded, but they managed to snag a table. Julia found herself wedged between Megan and a quiet guy from IT whose name she couldn't quite remember. So, Julia, one of the other women, Alicia, asked, Where are you from originally? Oh, I grew up about an hour north of here, Julia replied. Went to college in the city and never left. Nice. What did you study? Communications and business management. I've always been interested in how organizations function, you know? The conversation flowed easily from there. Julia found herself opening up, sharing anecdotes from college and past jobs. For the first time in a long while, she felt normal. Just another person chatting with coworkers over sandwiches. As they walked back to the office, Megan fell into step beside her. Hey, a bunch of us usually go out for happy hour on Fridays. You should join us this week if you're free. Julia smiled. That sounds fun, thanks. I'll check my schedule. Back at her desk, Julia felt a warm glow of contentment. The afternoon passed in a blur of data entry and filing, but she hardly noticed the tedium. She was too busy basking in the simple joy of being accepted, of fitting in. As 5 o'clock approached, Julia gathered her things. She'd done it. She'd made it through her first day as herself. Great job today, Julia, Diane said as she passed. See you tomorrow? Thanks, see you then. Julia's steps were light as she left the building. The city seemed different somehow, more vibrant, more alive. Or maybe that was just her. On impulse, she decided to treat herself to dinner out. There was a little cafe she'd always wanted to try, but had never quite worked up the courage. Tonight felt like the perfect opportunity. The cafe was cozy, strings of fairy lights twinkling overhead. Julia settled into a corner table with her bowl of pasta, pulling out the book she always carried in her purse. As she ate and read, she found herself eavesdropping on the conversations around her. A couple on an awkward first date, a group of friends planning a weekend getaway, an elderly man telling his granddaughter about his childhood. Ordinary moments, ordinary people. And here she was, just another ordinary person among them. The thought brought tears to her eyes. "Everything all right, miss?" The waiter looked concerned as he cleared her empty plate. Julia smiled, wiping her eyes. "Everything's perfect, actually. Thank you." Back home, Julia changed into comfortable pajamas and curled up on the couch. She had a dozen messages from Elena, asking how the day had gone. With a grin, Julia hit the call button. "Finally!" Elena's voice was a mix of exasperation and excitement. "I've been dying to hear how it went. Spill!" Julia laughed. "It was amazing, Elle. Everything I hoped for." She recounted the day's events, her voice growing thick with emotion as she described how natural it had felt, how easily she'd been accepted. "Oh, Jules," Elena said softly, "I'm so happy for you. You deserve this." "Thanks, sis. I couldn't have done it without you." They chatted for a while longer before saying goodnight. Julia sat in the quiet apartment, feeling overwhelmed by the day's emotions. On impulse, she dug out an old journal from her nightstand drawer. She hadn't written in it for months, not since she'd started hormone therapy. It felt right to mark this day, this milestone. Julia opened to a fresh page and began to write. "Dear Self, today, for the first time, I looked in the mirror and saw the real me looking back, the woman I've always known I was, finally visible to the world. It's hard to put into words how that feels, like coming home after a long journey, like waking up from a dream only to find that reality is better than anything I could have imagined. I know the road ahead won't always be easy. There will be challenges, setbacks, days when dysphoria creeps back in, but I also know that I'm strong enough to face whatever comes, because now I know what it feels like to be truly, authentically myself. And I'm never going back. To the me reading this in the future, I hope you're still moving forward, still growing, still embracing who you are. I hope you're surrounded by people who love and support you. I hope you're happy. You've come so far. I'm proud of you. Love, Julia." She closed the journal, holding it to her chest for a moment. Then she placed it back in the drawer and got ready for bed. As she drifted off to sleep, Julia's mind wandered over the events of the day. The friendly faces of her new coworkers, the simple pleasure of being called Miss at the cafe, the way her reflection had finally felt like her own. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to grow and learn. But for now, in this quiet moment, Julia was at peace. She was home. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of new experiences and small victories. Julia threw herself into her work at the temp agency, eager to prove herself. Her attention to detail and organizational skills quickly made her an asset to the team. Diane took notice, giving her more responsibility and even letting her sit in on client meetings. Julia soaked it all in, feeling more confident with each passing day. She found herself looking forward to the office's Friday happy hours. It was a chance to relax and get to know her coworkers in a more casual setting. Julia nursed her drink and listened more than she spoke, but she was slowly opening up. One evening, as they were leaving the bar, Megan linked arms with her. "You know, Julia, I'm really glad you joined our team. You fit right in." Julia felt a lump form in her throat. "Thanks, Megan. That means a lot." Outside of work, Julia was slowly expanding her horizons. She joined a book club at her local library, relishing the intellectual discussions and the chance to meet new people. She even worked up the courage to attend a yoga class, something she'd always wanted to try but had been too self-conscious to attempt before. There were still moments of discomfort, of course. The first time she had to use her ID at a bar and saw her dead name staring back at her. The occasional confused look when her voice came out a bit deeper than expected. But those moments were becoming fewer and further between. One Saturday afternoon, Julia found herself wandering through a department store. She'd come in for some basic toiletries, but found herself drawn to the cosmetics counter. A friendly saleswoman approached. Can I help you find anything, hun? Julia hesitated. I'm not really sure where to start, to be honest. I'm still learning about all this. The woman's smile softened with understanding. No worries, we all start somewhere. Why don't we find a foundation that matches your skin tone and go from there? For the next hour, Julia received a crash course in makeup application. The saleswoman, Maria, was patient and kind, never making Julia feel rushed or judged. There you go, sweetheart, Maria said, as she finished applying a soft pink lipstick. Take a look. Julia turned to the mirror and gasped softly. The makeup was subtle, enhancing her features without looking overdone. She looked pretty, feminine, like herself. It's perfect, she whispered. Thank you so much. Maria squeezed her shoulder. You're beautiful, honey, inside and out. Julia left the store with a bag full of carefully selected products and a heart full of gratitude. She couldn't wait to practice what she'd learned. That evening, she called Elena to gush about her makeover experience. I'm so proud of you, Jules, Elena said. You're really blossoming. I feel like I am, Julia agreed. It's like I'm finally allowing myself to enjoy all these little things I've always wanted to try. You deserve to enjoy them. Hey, speaking of trying new things, Mom and Dad were asking if you'd like to come over for dinner next weekend. Only if you're comfortable, of course. Julia's breath caught. She hadn't seen her parents in person since starting her transition. Their conversations had been stilted, awkward, but they were trying in their own way. I think I'd like that, she said finally. Tell them I'll be there. The week leading up to the dinner was a roller coaster of emotions. Julia threw herself into work, grateful for the distraction. But as Saturday approached, her anxiety grew. What should she wear? How would they react to seeing her? What if Earth to Julia? She blinked, realizing Megan had been trying to get her attention. Sorry, what? Megan's brow furrowed with concern. You okay? You seem a million miles away. Julia hesitated, then decided to confide in her friend. I'm having dinner with my parents tomorrow. It's the first time I'll see them since I started living as myself. Understanding dawned on Megan's face. Got it. That's a big deal. Yeah. I'm kind of freaking out, to be honest. Megan reached across their desks to squeeze Julia's hand. You've got this. Just be yourself. That's all anyone can ask of you. Julia managed a small smile. Thanks, Meg. I needed to hear that. Saturday evening found Julia standing on her parents' front porch, heart-pounding. She smoothed down her simple blue dress, took a deep breath, and rang the doorbell. The door swung open. Her mother stood there, eyes wide. Jose? Julia, come in, sweetheart. Julia stepped inside, the familiar sense of home washing over her. Her father appeared in the hallway, looking uncertain. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Julia said softly. There was a moment of awkward silence, and then her mother was hugging her tightly. Oh, my baby, look at you. Julia felt tears pricking at her eyes as she returned the embrace. When they separated, she saw her father had moved closer. You look nice, he said gruffly. It wasn't much, but from her taciturn father, it was practically a declaration of love. Julia felt something loosen in her chest. Thanks, Dad. Dinner was, not as bad as Julia had feared. There were awkward pauses, moments when her parents stumbled over pronouns, but there was also laughter as they reminisced about family vacations, genuine interest as Julia talked about her new job. As her mother cleared the dishes, her father cleared his throat. Julia, we're trying to understand. It's not easy for us, but we love you, you know that, right? Julia felt tears spill over. I know, Dad. I love you too, both of you. Her mother returned, eyes shining. We're so proud of you, sweetheart, for being true to yourself, for having the courage to live honestly. They embraced, a family healing slowly but surely. Later that night, back in her apartment, Julia called Elena. How did it go? Her sister asked anxiously. It was good, Julia said, surprised to find she meant it. Really good, actually. We're not magically fixed or anything, but we're trying, all of us. I'm so glad, Jules. You all deserve happiness." As they talked, Julia felt a sense of peace settling over her. She thought of her coworkers, her new friends, her family, of the woman she saw in the mirror each morning. For so long, she had been living a half-life, afraid to fully inhabit her true self. But now she was whole, now she was home. That night, as Julia prepared for bed, she found herself lingering in front of the mirror longer than usual. The glass reflected a woman who seemed almost unfamiliar, yet at the same time, she was exactly who she was always meant to be.
Thanks for watching. The rest won't be viewable on YouTube, so check out Patreon if you want more. I hope you have a wonderful day, my cutie.